Ladies and gentlemen, not so long ago I made a video about Adolf Bernhard Marx. In fact, it was this video here where I had this beautiful thumbnail combined with this brilliant title. This 1863 Beethoven makes modern pianists look like amateurs. In fact, we were talking about this book. I have the original here, which is cool, right? Adolf Bernhard Marx, he wrote a kind of introduction or kind of summary or whatever, his view on how to play Beethoven's piano works. And more especially, of course, a focus on his sonatas. 1863, there was kind of the end of his life. He was already in his younger years quite provocative, I would say, with his opinions, very much appreciated by no less than Beethoven. So at the end of his life, he had a long history in like remembering and viewing back on that history and see how the people played music of the past, how that evolved and how everything came to it, to the performance practice of 1863. And that was cool because in that video, here, this one, we talked about the Opus 26. And the Opus 26, that's a Beethoven sonata, obviously, or not obviously, that's a Beethoven sonata which has multiple movements. And the last movement of which this Adolf Bernhard Marx said the following. The excerpt starts actually here, where Bernhard Marx actually commented on the A major sonata, Opus 101, and then he said Beethoven marked that Allegro bis has superscribed an addition quickly but not too much. So, and with decision. And then he said, for an accomplished player, it's not impossible to play this passage as fast again as it is meet, but can the listener be able to perceive and feel all the voices which form the polyphonic network? Later on, as we will see also in this video, Marx mentioned other works, other movements by Beethoven that pianists in his days, 1863, could play in double the speed compared to what Beethoven had in mind. And so in this video, I'm going to add a little chapter to that. A little bit of a surprise, I'm posing my own video here just to say to you that on Monday we launched our next Kickstarter, the release of the first volume, the first box of CDs, 9 CDs of the complete Beethoven keyboard works with Alberto Sanna at the piano. This release was the most successful we had until now. In less than 12 hours. The entire project was funded, so a big shout out to all of you who have supported this project from the very beginning. It's not too late though, there's still 27 days to join the project. There are a lot of rewards, you find all the information on Kickstarter, link in the description box, but first watch this entire video and then go to Kickstarter, and there you find all the information. The coolest reward, I know that from many of you, is to get your name in the booklet of this CD box as a contributor. So after watching this video, go to Kickstarter if you haven't backed this project already and just see if it's something for you. I hope to see many more names there on Kickstarter as part of this project. And now, without further ado, back to the video. Let's go back to our beloved Adolf Bernhard Marx. And I say beloved because this guy is a very important source, not only because of the history that he had, but especially the way he is describing that past. And so I used in one of the Marx videos this overview, and I think it's essential to have it here in front of us before we continue, because it summarizes what he is talking about. So he says basically, pianists are playing too fast. And by the way, this is something that not only Adolf Bernhard Marx complained about. This complaint, we've featured that on this channel quite a lot already, is started like at the beginning of the 19th century, but more especially like 1820 we have sources. Fink, also a very important figure of the 19th century, already in 1839-ish, something like that, who invited actually musicians to metronymize works in order to to prove to people of his generations, we are playing these works way too fast, guys, we have to do something. And then, surprise, surprise, they give metronome marks that are so much faster than we can can imagine. And so you all know the solution to that. You take 2 ticks for 1. If you have a metronome mark, a historical metronome mark, I would say, and you want to interpret the metronome mark by Beethoven, by Chopin, by Schumann, you just take 2 clicks of your metronome, which represent the duration of that note value in the metronome mark, which is simply a kind of translation and conversion of the up, down, or the takt, so to say, to the left, right of the metronome or the pendulum. It's very simple, in fact. So Marx says also pianists are playing too fast, especially, I would say, works of the past. Some movements, and that's a critical passage, even twice the speed it should get. And then also in the other video, if you didn't watch that, go and check it out. You will see, and we will read the passage together. He says, the metronome ended all confusion. It was something like along the line, like everybody knows that the metronome, of course, there is no confusion with that. When composers give metronome marks, well, what is there to doubt? Well, that's very different today, right? Because today, those metronome marks, for those of you who are new here, well, they are a mysterious thing. Because guess what? When you look at Beethoven's metronomization, but Chopin, same thing, Schumann, even more so. But if you dive into the literature of the 19th century and you go and check these etudes, Karl Czerny, Theodor Döhler, Alcon, you go to Thalberg, the metronomizations that these people gave in our modern understanding, where 1 click equals the note value in the metronome mark, doesn't make any sense. So hearing someone says of 1863, the metronome when the metronome was introduced, it ended all confusion, as we all know, right? Well, today, the vast majority of musicians and musicologists are very confused by the metronome. So that alone puts all of that current knowledge of the metronome reading much in its perspective and makes it already untenable, so to say. Now, what we're going to do in this video, Alberto recently came. He recorded another piece, another CD, so to say, already of the second box. By the time this video goes online, perhaps we have already a Kickstarter for the first box, but the first box is complete. But he came for another CD for the second box, and he recorded the Moonlight Sonata. And the Opus 27 number 2, which is a Moonlight Sonata, is one of those pieces. And since we have now a recording by Alberto, we can compare it to a modern recording. And then we can come to the conclusion. Alberto plays a metronome mark by Czerny in whole beat, and we're going to listen to a recording made by Valentina Lisitsa of this piece, and she plays it pretty well in single beat. So there are pieces, guys, that people can play in single beat. The question is if that leads to some solution to the general problem. And Adolf Bernhard Marx will prove it's not. So before we do that, let's read again what he had to say about these pieces in particular. So we continue from the previous passage, the Opus 101, Beethoven marked the Allegro, and so on and so on and so on. For such players, so those players that play, for instance, here the Opus 101 in double the speed, a rehearsal of the contents and character of the composition is useless. They are not willing to sacrifice with idiosyncrasy. They act unconsciously, which, by the way, today is often the case as well. People just copy. We recently made a video about a podcast that Ben Lauder made with Dina Joffa. Exactly the same thing. People just copy from each other. With such players, we say, Marx said, we must deal according to their own personal interest. And then he said, if you really, we must ask them, play the finales of the sonatas of Opus 26, 27, number 2, 53, 57, twice as fast as they ought to be played. Do the sentences really become more brilliant? And so on, and so on. Now, the question here is, I got some comments like, yeah, but in the German version, that's this one, by the way, that's this book, it says like, ein oder zweimal schneller, something like that. So 1 or 2 times faster, which actually means if you take it literally 2 to 4 times faster, which then the conclusion would be like, yeah, Marx is just a way of saying faster. It's not the case. The context of this text is very clear. He is still talking about the Opus 101 here, which I started this video with, in which he said, for an accomplished player, it's not impossible to play this passage as fast again as it is speed. So double the speed. It's obviously also also what he meant here. And it's like in the English translation, it's no discussion. It's literally there, but it's also what he meant, ein oder zweimal schneller. And it's not like just a way of saying, he marks, he lists a list of pieces, the opus 26, 27, number 2, 53, 57, exactly because in those instances, he sees the possibility, he hears people play this piece twice the tempo, double the tempo, which is a lot, double the tempo compared to what it ought to be played, like according to the intention of the composer. And therefore the metronome is important. Therefore also I made this overview. The metronome ended all confusion. It's very important. So we have a few elements here, and then we go to the music. Marek says pianists are playing too fast, way too fast, and he's not alone. Some movements even twice the speed. And now what is then twice the speed? Therefore, we have to refer to what he says about the metronome. I'm not going to repeat that, just go to the other video. There I read the passages and also discuss about it. We have to incorporate the metronome here because he even talks about the Hammerklavier sonatas metronomization and he doesn't condemn it. He just accepts it. So Marx really is embedded in these historical metronome marks and he starts from that universe. I'm not saying that he necessarily would take the same tempi as Karl Czerny or Ignaz Moschles for the sonatas. I'm not saying that, but it's in the same universe. And so in that context, we have to look at the passage that he wrote like, okay, but in these particular instances, you can play twice the speed. Okay, then let's check it. I'll give you Alberto's recording, and I'll give you also Lisitsa's recording. So it's this presto agitato. We're going to listen to a fragment played by Alberto that's just recorded a few weeks back. I don't have any video of that. So it's an audio fragment, but then you can follow the score. Alberto plays in a tempo of half note 92. Half note 92 is a metronome mark that you can find in the Haslinger edition. Haslinger was a publisher, and Haslinger started the complete Beethoven works in 1828, so right after Beethoven's death. And he asked Karl Czerny to metronomize these works. It are those metronome marks that Alberto is following in the complete recordings of the Beethoven keyboard works. Alberto takes half note 92 in whole beat, which means in today's reading, he plays this piece in quarter note 92. And then we'll go to Valentina Lisitsa, and she plays in an astonishing half note 88, so very close to single beat. Double the tempo as Alberto. So for those of you who have never heard whole beat performances, this will be a shock. For those of you who know that, it won't be a shock. And if you're new to whole beat, just give it a little bit of time. There is a world opening for you. Now we can dive into so many questions like, I don't hear the presto, this is not fast, this is by no stretch of the imagination like fast. I get those points. We can make a video of that. Let me know in the comments. I can make a video in which we go in depth in this piece, and I will show you also in the recording by Lisitsa where the problematic places are. Because it's not just enough to say like, I don't feel the presto, and then say, okay, it has to be faster by definition. You have to also look into the score. We're not going to do that in this video. Just this video is about, can we play this piece in double the tempo? And the answer is yes. Okay, so far so good. So if we go back to our overview here, well, we are on track because Marx says in 1863, some pianists play too fast, some movements even twice the speed. Okay, so that means if we want to replicate that situation, we have now the Alberto recording and Lisitsa can double the tempo. But now it comes. Now we're going to apply the Marx doctrine exactly in the same way as I did in that video, the last video I made on Marx. And what does that mean? the implication of this is, okay, when Marx used the metronome in single beat, that means when the Czerny half note 92 or about, I mean, we're not talking about one beat in particular, but this kind of tempo range for this piece, and by the way, you go to other sources, you go to Moscheles, you go to Von Bülow, you go to all, no, regardless which edition you choose in the 19th century or at metronome marks, they will be all in the same range. They're all on the same level. There was a kind of tempo notion that these people still had. So it doesn't matter if we take Czerny or Moscheles or Bülow, doesn't matter. We have these metronome marks, let's say around half note 92 for this piece. When Marx used the metronome in single beat, when really half note 92 meant in his idea, every click of the metronome is one half note. Well, then we go to Valentina Lisitsa again, and when we play this recording, so in modern standards, many musicians, most musicologists, this performance is an actual representation of an historical metronome mark. From that assumption, then we apply the Marx doctrine. And how do we do that? We then have to assume that players in his time were able to double this tempo. And then we get this result, which YouTube makes us very easy to replicate that. So again, what we're going to hear now is something, according to modern musicology, people played in 1863. Or we go, and I take the score here so you can follow again with our Alberto, and we say, okay, what would happen when Marx's view on metronome marks was from a whole beat perspective, when he took the back and forth together as to represent the note value in the metronome mark. Okay, let's see if we can double the speed by Alberto. So that's exactly the same tempo as Valentina Lisitsa had originally, so without any digital manipulation of double speed. So now we have this weird situation. Follow me here. Marx says, pianists play way too fast. Some movements, and he makes a list, some movements even double the speed compared to what originally was the intention of the composer. Now we have two versions. We have our Alberto here, like my partner in crime also for the symphonies, where he plays in Czerny, Haslinger, half note 92, and the results in like the whole beat application is then actually quarter note 92, and we have Lisitsa half note 88. So that's, let's say, the double of the tempo. In which universe Marx, his writings, or what he had to say makes sense? When we go from a single beat perspective, Alberto falls off the table and Lisitsa comes here. That's the standard then. That's how it's supposed to be played in the eyes of Marx. But double the speed is not going to happen. So single beat is in complete conflict with what Marx had to say about this. But when we move Lisitsa back on this place and we take Alberto's recording here, then everything makes sense. If this, so Alberto's, our vision, our whole beat vision on these metronome marks is correct and aligns with what actually Marx had in mind, then we say, okay, we can double the tempo. There we have a recording. So we have one version that works and we have another version that works, but that's only possible from a whole beat perspective. Now, it's not the end of the story. A long time ago, I made a video about this Moonlight Sonata, and was one of the videos that really blew up. Still with Lisitsa, by the way. And we talked also about another passage in this piece, which in a way is actually even on itself not only instructive, but also creates a huge conflict with modern practices. So if we scroll further to the end of this piece, you will see we have 16th notes here all over the place. That's the basic note value, so to say. And then suddenly Beethoven introduces 32nd notes. And if you remember that discussion back then, and also in the comment section, people would say like, yeah, but these 32nd notes, that's an arpeggio. That's a cadenza. So here you're free. Why am I saying that? Listen to the result of Alberto's recording and of Lisitsa's recording. We will start with Alberto. What I would like you to listen to is stability of tempo. And I will be coming back to this because I have a very important point to make, something that is in addition to that video that I made a few years back, and also something that really will put everything in a different perspective. So here is Alberto, still in the half note / quarter note 92, and just listen to the tempo stability that he will guide the listener through in this passage. So if you look at the score, Beethoven uses 32nd notes here. He's doubling the tempo. You get where I'm going, right? He's doubling the tempo. And there is no indication here of a so-called cadenza of free whatever. But now listen how Lisitsa plays the same fragment. And again, pay attention to tempo stability. So suddenly, these arpeggios that Beethoven deliberately wrote in double the tempo because of the effect he wanted at the end of this piece, like this climax, she takes the tempo down there. And we all know what the reason is. Of course, she ends up with like a great effect. That's also why people like that. I'm not saying that it is like not effectful. The question here we want to solve is like, did Beethoven have this in mind? And can we learn something from that aspect in regards to what the original authentic quote-unquote correct tempo is for this piece? And yes, we can. Because she ends these arpeggios in exactly the same tempo that Alberto played these in. And now people will be saying like, yeah, but that's obviously in the score. Well, first off, it's not in the score. It's even not implied. There's no practice in that time that says like when you double the speeds of the note values, you have to like in the same piece, you can do whatever you want. And in fact, I was preparing this video and I thought like, let's just check. Hans von Bülow, Lebert von Bülow. And surprise, surprise, what does he write? In tempo here. In tempo. It's not in the original score by Beethoven. So the question I ask to you, this score is either von Bülow or Lebert who made this. They worked as a team. Why do you think, in the light of everything we said now and everything we just listened to, also the Lisitsa performance, why do you think that von Bülow, or Lebert for that matter, made this remark? In tempo. It's the same time. About the same time in which Adolf Bernhard Marx made that remark. Hey guys, you can play this piece twice the tempo, but why should you? And what would be the consequence of all these people who will be playing these pieces and this piece in particular twice the speed? That you slow down here. And so what is von Bülow doing? In tempo, guys. Whatever you do with your tempo, you do not slow down here. Obviously not. So we have here a direct confirmation from the same time of Adolf Bernhard Marx that you do not slow down there. And so, what can I say? This is one of the strongest sources that and stronger sources in a sense, this source really almost visually shows the impossibility of a single beat reading today. It's unattainable. We've made so many different, or we took this issue from so many different angles. And each and every time it's just one angle, and then people, oftentimes not you, by the way, you're the greatest audience I can imagine anybody deserves. It's unbelievable to have you here, but you get my point. People say like, where is my escape door? And then you have this one angle and say, but this is a counter argument. And then you have another angle countering that counter argument, and they go back here. It's like this piece of soap in the shower. You cannot grasp it. And I give up on that. In the beginning, when I had this YouTube channel, I thought like, okay, it makes sense to go in the comments and things, but no, it doesn't make any sense. You have to really open your mind for this. But this Adolf Bernhard Marx source, if you just sit down just for 5 minutes and you let the information just sip through, what other conclusion can you give? Are we going to throw Alberto from the table? The recording, for Alberto not, but our whole beat interpretation, put Lisitsa in the place, but there is no doubling the tempo. And if you say to yourself, yeah, but it's just this way of saying about that, Marx, yeah, I mean, there comes a point where, of course, every conversation ends, but this is not going away. This is not going to change then the facts as they display themselves. It's not an opinion, it's not a view, it's not like a belief. It's just a fact. We can double the tempo of these movements on one condition, and one condition only, that we take whole beat as a starting point. Think about it and let me know in the comments what you actually come up as a conclusion. I think majority of you will say like, hell, this is hell of an argument. But if you do not agree, stick to the argument before you jump to another one. Don't say like, yeah, but this cannot be true because of something else. Stick to this, solve this. That's how you actually go back into history and solve these mysteries of the past. How did these people play? It's not, again, that Adolf Bernhard Marx gives the entire Bible of playing Beethoven. It's also a kind of upgraded performance practice. Of course, everybody did that. But the tempo aspects, that is something special. For many of these people, that was still dear to them. Yes, they used more pedal. They used different instruments. They used different articulation for sure. But when people went over this threshold of playing so fast, then they took action. So sit down and just try to solve it in another way and leave it to me in the comment boxes below. Guys, that's all I've got for you today. Check out our Patreon site. Don't forget, there's now a free member part as well. And thank you for watching. We see each other very soon again. Bye.